Hello, and welcome to Baltic Ways, a podcast bringing you interviews and insights from the world of Baltic studies. I'm your host, Dr. Agnese. Since the war in Ukraine began, more than 20,000 refugees have made their way to Latvia, where they have largely been welcomed with open arms from people across the political spectrum. Today, we speak with Agnese Lāce, a migration and integration policy expert in Latvia. She gives us insights into the situation on the ground, the political response, and what this might mean for other refugees and asylum seekers arriving in Latvia. Stay tuned. So Agnese, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Maybe we can start with you telling us a little bit about your background.
While currently my affiliation is with an 8-month-old baby at home, I'm a researcher in the field of migration and integration. I have been working with the think tank Providus. It's a Riga, Latvia-based think tank working on integration and migration policy analysis with a focus on immigrants, third country nationals in Latvia. I've also worked on projects at the University of Latvia, also looking at immigration and integration of the third country nationals here. And I'm still working on my PhD at Koç University in Istanbul, where I look at the issue of dual citizenship and how ideal citizens are framed in the discourse of the Latvian parliament. My work for the past 10 years essentially has been linked with issues of societal cohesion and how both immigrants and also Latvian citizens with various identities, how they feel and are perceived here in the Latvian society.
Thank you for that. I wonder if you can give us a little bit of insight into what is happening on the ground now. Of course, the Baltic states have been among the countries at the forefront of providing rhetorical and military and diplomatic support for Ukraine. And there has also been significant sort of grassroots efforts around welcoming Ukrainian refugees. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what that looks like on the ground in Riga.
Right. So there are, I think you could say, 3 streams of activities. So one, of course, is the coordinated government response to this and the official Latvian policy track, which involves not only direct assistance, but also diplomatic tools, etc. The second stream, which I'm most familiar with, is the coordinated NGO response. And whenever there were some kind of signals that Russia is planning, or you could say hinting at planning to do anything in Ukraine, one organization called I Want to Help Refugees, they initiated that NGOs should meet together in the same platform just to talk about whatever their resources are and capabilities are. And coincidentally, the first meeting took place on the 22nd of February, 2 days before the actual attack. So what was good at this point is that there was already, you could say a platform for all of these organizations to converse in and on and to see what can be done. So these NGOs have played a crucial role in the response of receiving Ukrainians here who want to come to Latvia, in both, organizing transportation, identifying accommodation possibilities, housing possibilities, identifying material needs that should be met, clothing, food, supplies, small electrical appliances for an empty apartment, you name it. These NGOs have reacted very swiftly to these needs, and even more so have become a reliable partner to the government in these efforts. But because, of course, with the current amount of people arriving in Latvia, and they now estimate that we have already reached the 10,000 people that the government had been preparing for, but perhaps even more, the response to this cannot be done only by the government itself. So these NGOs, volunteer organizations, and so on have played a critical role also in identifying the needs of these people and saying, perhaps we should think about this type of service or that type of service. So that's the second stream. And then the third stream is the societal response, which I have to say is something phenomenal. There was a survey or just like an application form or I don't know, a Google form designed by I Want to Help Refugees, where individuals could write and say what they can offer. And it was anything from accommodation to like a couple of hours of translation to babysitting to driving to the border and bringing people back to donating various types of items that are needed. There are 500 drivers who have filled the form, and 270 of them are active in WhatsApp chats to see whether there's a need to go anywhere. And then people are just like posting on Facebook groups, hey, I had an idea that maybe we should have like a weekly meetup. Hey, I can offer my theater studio. Hey, I can offer cooking classes. You know, just so many ideas of making the environment more welcoming at the moment. So those are the responses to the situation with intent of helping.
Yeah, the popular response and governmental response has been fairly swift and in some ways sort of overwhelming and surprising, and maybe in other ways not so surprising. But I'm interested if you can talk a little bit about this group, Gribu palīdzēt bēgļiem, I Want to Help Refugees, and the way that the membership has increased and increased pretty significantly, and interestingly in a way to include sectors of the society that, or the population that wouldn't necessarily have been part of that group, sort of 4 months ago. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that shift.
Yeah, so the movement, I Want to Help Refugees, Gribu palīdzēt bēgļiem, was born in 2015 in response to the refugee flows from Syria and other Middle Eastern countries, mostly to Europe, whenever Greece and Italy felt overwhelmed by these flows of migrants. And some European countries were asking for support. And then this movement was born in spite of political and general societal unwillingness to accept many refugees. And we didn't accept many refugees. The numbers have been small for most of the time. I mean, the biggest number of asylum requests in 1 year that Latvia has received has been around 500. And not all of them were positive, right? So there were some rejections. So we've been operating with fairly small numbers for a long time. And so this group of about 3,000 people was, a safe space to talk about refugee integration and to mostly find people willing to assist in various situations with accommodation, etc. Because finding a job or an apartment for a migrant from the Middle East has not been easy in Latvia. We are a prejudiced, xenophobic society, and this has been confirmed by multiple surveys, like feelings of social distance, of who you want to connect in your daily life and not. What types of migrants should Latvia accept? Are there any benefits to the society by accepting migrants? And so these groups of migrants have for a long time been identified as undesirable, right? But now with Ukrainians, the situation is different. It could be the fact that there is a common enemy, you could say. It could be the fact that they are people from a country much closer to us, both geographically, culturally, history-wise. It could be because there are people here who have family members in Ukraine or who know someone who has a family member there or a friend. There are all these subtle links with Ukraine that make this situation different. So the membership of this Facebook group called I Want to Help Refugees has grown from 3,000 to 21,000 people in the past,
Wow.
5 weeks. impressive, especially in the first days. So there are now people in this group that would most likely not have supported refugees from other countries beforehand, the ones that arrived here. And on one hand, this is understandable. As I mentioned, there might be a sense of more familiarity and also connectedness with Ukrainians in this current context. But then I would say that there is this kind of selective willingness to help refugees. I'll help refugees, but they make sure, whenever they write a comment, they say, but I only will help Ukrainian war refugees. Very specifically mentioning this, whenever they offered accommodation, they would write only Ukrainian war refugees. So there is this kind of selective willingness to help these refugees. Perhaps if we would drive and meet Syrians at the border of Syria and another country and bring them to Latvia, we would see a completely different situation in the Greek islands, or, there would be a different number of people who would be able to leave Syria without having to choose how much to pay a trafficker to bring them across countries illegally, because that's how the asylum system works. You have to arrive in a country to actually ask for asylum. So there's this kind of selective willingness to help some refugees and not others, which is fine. The numbers now are so great. We of course need people who are willing to help. We can't say that this help is unneeded. Of course, this help is also needed, but it's just an interesting shift in the way we talk about refugees. Now, suddenly everyone wants to talk about the available help to refugees, whether this is sufficient, how come they have to go and do this and this and this to actually receive help. For a long time, most of the people in this country did not care about whatever refugees had to do to actually access any type of assistance, right? This type of reaction is not only from the society, of course, correspondingly, it's also the same from politicians. We have a specific law that says that Ukrainian civilians will receive temporary protection in Latvia. And this law also lists the array of available help and assistance to Ukrainians. Among those are several things that have not been available to a specific subgroup of people who have received international protection in Latvia. So there's people with refugee status who mostly get the same assistance as locals, as Latvian citizens. But then there's beneficiaries of subsidiary protection. In Latvian, it's called the alternative status. And for them, for a long time, the available assistance was smaller and they couldn't receive like state family allowances and so on. Now, this has also changed, but the regulation will only change next year. But anyway, Ukrainians immediately got the full range of support imaginable, which is great. These are things that me and my colleagues have been talking about for a long time, that this is the type of support that is necessary for refugees, that should be implemented this way. But we did not find perceptive listeners, I guess, for a long time, or we did, but the numbers were small and the society didn't expect any action. Now the society expected action, more people are willing to help. So the regulation of available help also has been more comprehensive than before. Whether this will work in the long term, I can't say, but the immediate response has been impressive. At the same time, there are some aspects that have already caused some kind of discussion in the society. For example, Ukrainians can start working right away. They don't have to know Latvian if it doesn't interfere with performing the tasks of the position, then they don't have to know Latvian. And there is also no point that says that they don't have to know Latvian now, but they do by then and then. No, nothing. which, number one, those refugees who have been here for a while trying to learn Latvian to actually be able to work in their profession are quite outraged by, and reasonably so, saying, hello, I was also here as a refugee, but I didn't have this option. And this is, of course, because many Ukrainians can communicate in a language that many people here understand, which is Russian. But then this also raises some questions among the Russian-speaking population here, who have been asked to provide language comprehension certificate to work in certain positions as well. So again, what happened there? Why is this group different? You could say that both of them and the society here expects that they will be here only for a short period of time. And this is why it would not be, reasonable to ask them to learn the language. But we don't know that. We hope that. We don't know that. Of course, they also probably realize there's not enough opportunities to learn the language. There should be supply as well. If we require them to know Latvian, then there should be a supply of language courses that can help them learn the language. And if there's 10,000 people here at the moment, it might be a challenge. So those, and then some kind of allowances that they receive, or one-off payments whenever they start employment, etc. Those have caused some kind of, I wouldn't say outrage, but a stir up in the society. What about us?
Mm-hmm. On that sort of note, that's what about us question. You and I have been talking about integration and migration issues for a long time, actually. And as you noted, you've also had these discussions with your colleagues for a long time as it pertains to other population groups. And even just thinking about these sort of simple steps of easing access to employment or easing access to temporary protected status, or how people can arrive in the country, it facilitates such potentially better outcomes. And I wonder if you see that there may be hope for structural change and increased change in integration systems, whether it's language learning or adjusting expectations or laws or something like that.
I would sure hope so. One of the things that happened recently was that the Society Integration Foundation took up the responsibility of coordinating refugee integration with an outlook in the future to widen their target audience to all newcomers. And this is something that wasn't there before. There wasn't one coordinating institution for, all aspects of integration. As there have always been so many institutions involved in this, and almost never a responsible organization or institution. So now, with the new coordinating role of Society Integration Foundation, that could be step number one to make this a more, strategic change on the national level, to have a more coordinated, comprehensive response. At the same time, what regards to long-term integration of Ukrainians, no one has even started that conversation yet. I think this conversation is beginning in the parliament, but so far the focus has been on immediate response. I would say that this is an opportunity, though, to kind of refurbish the integration system, to rethink how we deal with, even language courses. So far, we could provide language courses for free to 500 people per year.
Not very many.
No, not very many, especially when there's between 8 to 10,000 newcomers every year. Many of them were students or people who came for work, and I don't think there was, a sense of urgency with these language courses. There was also a change in the immigration law saying that there is now going to be a duty of integration where you have to take integration courses and language courses in the first 3 years of your residence here. This does not include refugees, but other newcomers. But still, there was talk of this, and there wasn't really a response on how these language courses will be provided. Now, the demand for language courses is so high that the responsible institution has to really quickly think of solutions of how to actually provide these opportunities and provide access to these language courses. And that's just one example. There are so many things that so far have been kind of ad hoc, always done in the framework of projects. If there is money, we will do it. If there isn't, well, maybe next year. So now with such a quick influx of people in a society, of course, we need a coordinated and comprehensive response to this. And now is high time to think about it. I think the groundwork has been done. I think the foundations are there. It's just now a matter of funding and of political will to support this. And I guess the political will is there also for the reasons we discussed before, why we are willing to help refugees now more than ever before.
Yeah, an opportunity maybe to capitalize on that political will. And I wonder if you, in just the last minute, if you had any suggestions for people who are listening, how they can support refugees, any suggestions there?
If you want to help Ukrainian refugees who are in Latvia, you can visit the website www.ukraine-latvia.com, and you will find out information about the ways how you can also help. There are several organizations working here who you can support. If you want to support Ukrainian refugees or any refugees elsewhere, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, and International Organization Migration are the ones to turn to look for local contacts or also international contacts. These organizations also now provide much valuable needed support on the ground for refugees still on the way. And then national organizations in many of the countries bordering Ukraine are doing this work. But I think the most important thing that we can all do at the moment to support Ukraine and the Ukrainian refugees is to look for information that is fact-based on the war in Ukraine, the atrocities there, and spread this information as much as possible to get the international society to understand what is going on there and why a harsher response internationally is needed, why we help refugees on a daily basis and notice the increase in prices of energy and why this price of energy is a small price to pay in comparison to whatever these people are paying with on a daily basis.
Absolutely. That is an important reminder too. Well, thank you again, Agnese. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you. Best of luck.
Thank you for tuning in to Baltic Ways, a podcast from the Association for the Advancement of Baltic Studies, produced in partnership with the Baltic Initiative at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. A note that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of AABS or FPRI. I'm your host, Dr. Agnese. Subscribe to our newsletters at aabs-balticstudies.org and fpri.org/Baltic-initiative for more from the world of Baltic studies. Thanks for listening. See you next time.